She had served champagne to billionaires, plated canapes for royalty, but tonight, as she adjusted the white gloves on her hands and stepped into the glittering ballroom, her breath caught for an entirely different reason, because the man walking through the double doors of the room was her ex. Elena froze. Her silver tray of hors d'oeuvres tilted slightly, trembling in her grip. No one else noticed, but her body did. Every muscle remembered him. Every heartbreak returned like it had never left. He wore a sharp navy tuxedo, confident as ever, surrounded by high-powered guests, but when his eyes landed on her across the room, his steps faltered. That moment stretched like an entire lifetime. He blinked, then blinked again, thought as if seeing a ghost. Elena gritted her teeth and looked away, pretending she didn't just catch her ex-fiancé entering his own engagement party to someone else. She turned toward the kitchen, chest tight, trying to breathe. It had been for years since he left without closure. For years since she rebuilt her life from rock bottom. She was a different woman now. So why did the sight of him feel like reopening an old wound with a brand new blade? And why did he still look at her like that? Like he still remembered everything. When the man she loved walks into the ballroom, as the groom, Elena finds herself working the party of the decade. But there's more to his engagement than it seems. Stay tuned for secrets behind smiles and pasts that refuse to stay buried. Subscribe if it touches your heart. Asterisk, Elena ducked into the kitchen, pressing her hand to her chest like she could physically slow her heartbeat. She wasn't that girl anymore, the one who cried over unanswered texts or begged the universe to bring him back. No, she was here to work, even if the job tonight meant carrying the engagement party of the man who once swore she was his. Future, need a second? Her manager asked, mistaking the flush in her cheeks for heat exhaustion. Elena gave a tight nod. I'm fine, but she wasn't. Not when just 30 feet away. Julian Stone, her ex-fiancé, was laughing with guests, sipping champagne like he hadn't once broken her into pieces. She peeked through the swinging kitchen door, just in time to see him shake hands with some politician. But then, his eyes swept the room again and landed on her. And just like that, his whole expression changed. His confident stride faltered. She turned away fast. But it was too late. Elena. His voice slid into her like a memory familiar, low and impossible to ignore. She stiffened. Slowly, she turned. The silver tray in her hand held like a shield. Mr. Stone, she said coolly, champagne. He looked stunned. Is that really you? She didn't smile. Depends. Are you really engaged? Julian blinked. Once, twice. There was that tiny pause that said everything. Elena. He said again, quieter this time. I didn't know you'd be here. If you had, she asked. What? Julian, would you have canceled the party? He opened his mouth but said nothing. He looked good, devastatingly good, but there was something in his eyes that wasn't. There 4 years ago, regret, maybe, or recognition. Your fiancé's beautiful, Elena said. Her voice steady. She looked like the kind of girl your mother would finally approve of. It's complicated. Elena's jaw clenched, right? Because arranged engagements usually are. He hesitated, then stepped forward, lowering his voice. You look different. I am different. Julian stared at her like he didn't know whether to apologize or fall to his knees. I never stopped thinking about you, he whispered. She didn't flinch, didn't let him see the way those words landed like a bruise. Instead, she met his gaze evenly. Shame, she said. You stop acting like it. She turned and walked away before he could answer. But her hand still trembling around the tray betrayed how far from fine she really was. Asterisk, Elena spent the next hour avoiding him, like it was her full-time job. She refilled champagne flutes, passed tiny hors d'oeuvres, and smiled at Manhattan's elite without once looking in Julian's direction. But she felt him, like gravity had shifted every time she stepped into a room. It was like his eyes were already waiting. She hated that. She still knew the rhythm of his presence in the back pantry. She was gathering extra napkins when the door creaked open. Her body tensed before she even turned. Julian stepped in, closing it gently behind him. She didn't move. This door doesn't latch, she said quietly, her back still to him. So whatever you think is going to happen, it won't. I just want to talk, he said. She turned then, leaning against the stacked metal shelves, arms crossed. The glow of a single bulb above them cast shadows across his face. For a moment, he looked like the boy she once loved before titles, before pressure. Before everything got too complicated to hold, you left, she said, voice low. No call, no reason. You disappeared. I was protecting you. Don't give me that, she snapped. You don't disappear on someone you love to protect them. He stepped closer. My father threatened to cut me off, Elena. My mother threatened to ruin your family. I thought if I left without a trace, they'd leave you alone. She laughed once, bitter. So you ghosted me to keep me safe? That's not noble, Julian. That's cowardice. He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew she was right. I thought I'd get over you, he admitted. I tried. I dated. I worked. But no matter what I built, it felt hollow without you. Her breath hitched, but she didn't let it show. You're engaged, she said flatly, to secure a merger. He replied, her father's company is merging with ours. The engagement's for show, temporary. Elena's chest tightened. She hated how much relief swirled inside her. Hated that his words still meant anything. And what happens after the merger? She asked. You just quietly disappear from her life to, no, he said softly, because I plan to end it. Tonight. Don't do it for me, she warned. I'm doing it for me, he said, because for the first time in 4 years, I feel awake again, and it's because of you. Silence filled the pantry, and then he stepped closer, close enough that the air between them buzzed. Elena didn't move away. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. And then, without thinking, Julian reached out, fingers brushing hers. Hesitant, but full of something aching and real. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean in either. Not yet. Asterisk, asterisk, Julian's fingers barely grazed hers, but Elena felt it like lightning. She hated that. Hated that her body still remembered him so easily when her heart had worked so hard to forget. He studied her, like he was looking for permission to say more. But Elena broke the moment, stepping back, grabbing the stack of cocktail napkins from the shelf. I'd have work to do. Julian's jaw tensed. You always run when things get close, she turned sharply. Don't you dare twist this on me. I stayed. Julian, you're the one who left. I know, he said quietly. And if I could go back, but you can't. The silence that followed was heavier than before. She looked at him, not the suit, not the fortune, not the polished version of the boy she used to love. She looked at the man beneath it all. I'm not the girl you left behind, she said. You don't get to come back and pick up where you dropped me. I don't want the girl you used to be, he said, voice low. I want the woman standing in front of me now. Elena's throat tightened. You don't even know who that is, she whispered. Then let me find out. She blinked, not because it was romantic, but because it felt dangerous. It felt like the beginning of another fall, and she had only just learned to stand again. Your fake fiancé, she said, changing the subject. Does she know this thing between you is for business? He nodded slowly. Her father orchestrated the whole deal. She's smart. She knows the game, and she's okay with it. Do you care? He asked. Elena hesitated. I care about not being a secret again. You wouldn't be. Julian took another step closer, closing the gap between them. This time, his presence didn't feel like gravity. It felt like choice, like he wasn't pulling her in. He was asking. She searched his eyes for the kind of sincerity you can't fake, and to her surprise, it was there. I'll call it off, he said. Tonight. Elena's voice was quiet. And then what? Julian's hand brushed hers again. Bolder this time. Then I start over, from scratch. No money, no empire, just me, trying to earn your trust for the first time that night. Her expression softened, and before she could stop herself, her fingers laced with his barely. Hesitantly, a real, then you better go and make good on that promise, she said, gently pulling away. He stared at her like she'd handed him the sun, and then he turned and left the pantry. Elena exhaled, her heart thudding. She didn't know if he was serious, but this time, he was the one walking away, and for once, she was the one holding the power. Asterisk, asterisk, Julian stepped back into the glittering ballroom like a man walking into battle. Every crystal chandelier sparkled, every guest laughed and clinked glasses. The orchestra swelled behind the clamor of Manhattan's elite, and at the center of it all stood Celeste Whitmore, his so-called fiancé, smiling for a camera, flawless and cold as glass. He crossed the room quickly. Celeste caught sight of him and tilted her head, one perfectly arched brow rising. You've been gone, she said, voice just loud enough for the nearest guest to overhear. People noticed. "We need to talk," Julian said under his breath, guiding her gently to a quieter corner behind a marble column. Celeste narrowed her eyes. "This isn't in the script, Julian. I'm ending it." Her expression didn't flicker. "Now." "Yes, now." She exhaled, slow and practiced, like she'd anticipated this moment all along. "Your father's not gonna like that," she said calmly. "He'll pull the merger, then let him." Julian replied, "I'm done trading my life for his empire." Celeste blinked. For a moment, something passed between them, maybe understanding, maybe disappointment, but not heartbreak. They'd both known this arrangement was nothing more than a transaction. She sighed. "Then make it public. Kill it with elegance. That's what people like you do." Julian nodded once and turned. Back near the bar, Elena balanced a tray of tartlets, her expression locked in professional neutrality. But when Julian climbed onto the small stage where the band was paused between sets, the microphone in his hand, the room fell silent. Elena looked up, her stomach dropped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice steady. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know this evening was meant to celebrate an engagement mine to Celeste Whitmore, a woman I deeply respect." Celeste stood poised, arms folded gracefully in front of her, her expression unreadable. "But the truth is," Julian paused, eyes scanning the crowd, then finding only one face, Elena's. "I can't go through with it, because I've spent a long living a life someone else designed for me." A ripple of gasps and murmurs swept through the guests. Julian continued, voice firm. "I once walked away from the only woman I ever loved. I let fear, family, and legacy make that decision for me, but I'm done letting fear rule my life. I turned toward Elena. She froze, tray in hand. "I don't know if I'll ever earn her forgiveness," he said, looking straight at her. "But I do know I'll never stop trying." Silence. Thick, awkward silence. Then the first glass clanked. A guest unsure whether to applaud or cringe. Then another. Celeste gave a stiff smile and a short nod. The crowd followed her lead, half-hearted. Claps, a few awkward cheers. The room had no idea what it had just witnessed. Julian stepped down. Elena's hands trembled, not because he'd chosen her in front of everyone, but because she didn't know what to do with a man who finally meant what he said when she'd spent years learning how to live without needing it. Asterisk, asterisk, Elena didn't wait for him to approach her. She slipped quietly into the hallway behind the ballroom, her tray still clutched in one hand, though she couldn't remember if it was empty or full. The hum of the party faded as she pushed through the side exit into a quiet service corridor. Cool air rushed against her skin. Her heart was still pounding. She didn't know what shook her more, Julian's speech or the fact that it had felt real. She'd imagined this moment for years. In some versions, she screamed at him. In others, she ignored him. But never once had she pictured him standing on a stage, giving up everything just to speak her name. Without shame, she paced the hallway, her heels echoing against the concrete floor, unsure whether to cry, laugh, or scream. The back door opened. Julian stepped through, looking nothing like the untouchable man from a few hours ago. His hair was slightly tousled, jacket slung over one shoulder. Like the weight of his performance had unraveled something in him. Elena. She didn't speak. He waited a beat, then walked toward her, slow and deliberate, like he knew if he moved too fast she'd vanish. "I meant every word. I didn't ask if you did." He gave a faint, wry smile, then say something. Yell, curse, slap me if you have to. Just don't walk away. Elena stared at him. "Do you think this is some kind of grand gesture that fixes for years of silence?" "No." He admitted, "I don't think anything can fix it, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Not in front of them, not in front of you. You humiliated her," Elena said quietly. "On a stage. She was in on it. She just didn't expect me to end it tonight." Elena swallowed hard. "You don't get to make a scene, expect me to fall back into your arms like I've been waiting. I know. I have a life now. I'm not here to ruin it," he said gently. "I just want to be part of it again. If there's space." She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the boy who had promised her the stars at 19 and vanished before 20. He was older, tired in places that didn't show on skin. But for the first time, he didn't look like someone trying to prove anything. He looked like a man who'd lost something real and realized too late it mattered more than everything else. "I don't know if there's space," she said honestly, "but you're standing in front of the door." Julian exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. Then I'll stand here, he said softly, as long as it takes. And for the first time that night, Elena didn't walk away. Asterisk Elena didn't speak as they walked side by side through the alley behind the venue. The city lights painted soft gold outlines on the brick walls. She still wore her apron. He still wore cufflinks worth more than her rent. And yet, for the first time in years, they looked like equals. Do you want to sit? Julian asked. Nodding toward a stone bench near the loading dock. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. They sat, a foot of space between them, close enough to feel the same breeze, far enough that the past had room to breathe. You know, Elena said, staring at the pavement, I thought about seeing you again 100 different ways. None of them looked like this. Julian chuckled under his breath. Me either. She turned to face him. Why'd you leave? The question hung there, raw and dangerous. Julian didn't flinch. Because I was scared. Because my family told me you weren't strategic. That loving you meant I'd lose everything. And at the time, I listened. She nodded slowly. And now I've had everything, and none of it ever filled the space you left. Elena swallowed hard. I wanted to hate you, she said. I told myself you were a coward, that it was easier than admitting you broke something in me. Julian looked down. You had every right to hate me, but I don't. Her voice was softer now. Not anymore. I don't hate you. I don't know how to trust you. That's fair. A long pause passed. He turned toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. Can I ask one thing? Elena met his gaze. Were you happy without me? She thought about the long shifts, the late nights, the years of scraping by and building something of her own. She thought of her quiet resilience, of how far she'd come. Then she said, some days, not all, but the days She looked up at him. They didn't have anything to do with you. He nodded, absorbing them like it was holy. I don't want to be the center of your life again, he said after a moment. But I'd love a seat at the edges, just somewhere, anywhere. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. Elena smiled faintly. You might have to earn that seat with a few burned blisters and dish shifts. He looked over at her, a light flickering behind his eyes. I'll wear an apron if I have to. She laughed short. Surprised, real. You look ridiculous, but you'd be there. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either, and that was more than he dared hope for. Asterisk, Julian showed up at the catering kitchen the next morning. No press, no driver, no designer suit, just him in jeans and a plain black t-shirt, holding the cups of coffee, and looking painfully out of place among the clatter of trays and shouting chefs. Elena stood frozen in the back prep area, paring knife in hand, stunned. You're serious? She asked. He held out a cup. You said I'd have to earn it. She blinked. You're not even supposed to be here. I called your boss last night. He thinks I'm doing a feature on small business kitchens for my next venture. He made air quotes. Sheepish. I may have implied I'm launching a charity. Elena narrowed her eyes. So you lied. He grinned. Strategically. She fought the smile tugging at her lips and took the coffee. Fine. But if you mess up the Canape Tower, I'm blaming you. The day went on in chaos. Orders, deliveries, spilled trays. Julian kept up. Mostly. He wasn't good, but he tried. And for the first time in years, Elena let herself watch him, without anger behind her eyes. But just after lunch, she found him standing in the walk-in freezer, hands shaking slightly. Cold feet already, she joked. He didn't answer. Her smile faded. Julian? He was staring at his phone screen, dark, but gripped so tightly it looked like he might crush it. I was supposed to be in Hong Kong today, he said finally. Board vote. The press is already spinning the story like I had a nervous breakdown. Elena leaned on the metal shelf. Did you? He looked up, startled, then let out a soft laugh. Maybe, or maybe I just woke up. Elena studied him, then quietly asked, why now? Julian hesitated, then slowly pulled something from his wallet. A photo that was old, creased, worn around the edges. A photo booth strip. To kids, barely out of high school, grinning like the world belonged to them. Her lipstick was smudged. His hand had been wrapped tightly around her waist. Asterisk, I've carried this since the day I left. He admitted. It's stupid. I never told anyone. Elena's eyes softened, but she didn't take the photo. That night you disappeared. You left me waiting outside that bus stop. I sat there for 2 hours before I realized you weren't coming. He looked away, throat working. I know. He said, I saw you from my car. I was parked across the street. Her heart still. What? I couldn't go, but I couldn't drive away either. So I just watched you cry. I hated myself for it. And then I hated myself more for not getting out. Tears stung her eyes not from the memory, but from the cruel truth of it. He had been there. He just hadn't chosen her. I wanted to hate you for that night. She whispered, you should. But now I think I've hated that part of me. The girl who waited. He stepped closer, his voice thick. I don't want you to be her again. I just want a chance to know the woman she became. She looked at him. Breath caught somewhere between sorrow and hope. Then nodded once, slowly, and for the first time in years. Julian didn't just look at her with longing, he looked at her like she was real. Like he finally understood the cost of everything he'd lost. Asterisk, the days that followed felt like borrowed time. Julian kept showing up, sometimes with excuses, sometimes without. He learned to chop vegetables without cutting his fingers, burned 3 trays of tartlets, and offered to carry every crate that came through the back door, as if lifting weight might lift some part of his guilt, too. But what made Elena pause wasn't his help. It was how he looked at her now. Not with the arrogant certainty of a man used to getting what he wanted, but with the quiet reverence of someone who knew he didn't deserve a second chance, and was showing up anyway. Still, she kept her heart guarded. She'd spent a long building herself without him, too many nights crying on cheap sheets. Too many early mornings working double shifts just to keep the lights on. She wasn't the girl who needed saving anymore, and she wasn't ready to fall back into a story that once shattered her. But life, as always, had its own timing. It was a Thursday night, 2 weeks after the fake engagement fiasco, when Julian knocked on her apartment door. He was holding a small grocery bag and wearing that same nervous expression he always had before a first kiss. Dinner, he said, sort of. I cooked. Well, attempted. Elena raised an eyebrow. You brought it to my place because your kitchen has fewer fire hazards than mine. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. The meal was a mess, slightly burned, wildly underseasoned, and plated with the enthusiasm of a toddler. But they laughed. They shared stories. He asked about her family, her college plans, the food blog she used to dream of starting. And for the first time, he listened. After dinner, they sat on her small balcony. The city buzzed below, and Julian was quiet for a long time before he finally said, I saw your bracelet. Elena blinked. What? At the engagement party. When you dropped your tray, you still wear it. Her hand moved instinctively to the thin silver chain on her wrist, worn down, but never taken off. It's just a bracelet, she murmured. It was your 19th birthday, he said. I gave it to you in that crappy Chinese restaurant after your shift. We were both soaked from the rain. She looked down. I told myself I'd take it off when I stopped loving you. Julian's breath caught. And now, I haven't decided. He leaned in, voice almost a whisper. Let me help you decide. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen. Liam, Friday 7 p.m. dinner still on. I can't wait. Julian saw it, his face still. Elena quickly locked the phone and looked away. You're seeing someone, he said, voice low. It's new. We haven't defined anything. He looked at her with the weight of realization settling in his chest. You don't owe me anything, Elena. But he stopped. I can't pretend this doesn't hurt. She looked at him with gentle honesty. I didn't plan for you to come back, Julian. I moved on the best way I knew how. And maybe this thing with Liam, maybe it's just me trying to feel something else. But it's real enough to have a name. Elena didn't respond. Julian stood up slowly. I don't want to make you choose. She looked up at him, tears forming. But you're hoping I will. He gave a soft, broken smile. Not hope, just waiting. Then he walked out the door, and Elena sat alone, on the balcony, her bracelet cold against her skin. The city lights blurring through the tears she hadn't meant to cry. Asterisk, Elena couldn't sleep that night. The silence in her apartment felt louder than ever. The leftover scent of Julian's awful attempt at garlic chicken clung to the air, and somewhere in her gut, regret twisted like a ribbon to tightly knotted. She stared at the message from Liam. Still on for tomorrow. He was safe, kind, thoughtful in the quiet, predictable ways. She knew he'd never leave her crying at a bus stop or vanish when life got complicated, but he'd also never made her heart race just by saying her name. and that terrified her. The next day, she showed up to her shift early, only to find Julian wasn't there. He hadn't called, hadn't sent a message, not even a passive-aggressive comment on the group kitchen thread about how the pastry chef hoarded all the espresso. And somehow, that absence said more than his presence ever had. That afternoon, her boss called her into the office. "Elena," he said, looking confused, "Julian Sinclair just wired a donation. Under your name. A grant. He said it's to cover your culinary school tuition." Her throat closed. "What? He didn't want me to tell you," her boss muttered. "But I figured you'd want to know that someone still believes in you." She left the office shaking. That night, she canceled dinner with Liam. She didn't offer much explanation, just a quiet apology and a promise that he deserved more than half a heart. Then she ran through the rain-slicked streets, cold forgotten, heart-pounding until she reached the last place she ever thought she'd return to, Julian's penthouse. She hesitated in the lobby, soaked and breathless, her reflection trembling in the gold elevator doors. But she pressed the button. When he opened the door, he looked stunned. "Elena, I wore the bracelet," she said, cutting him off. "All these years, I wore it through everything, every heartbreak, every shift. Every time I told myself I didn't love you anymore." Julian stared at her, eyes wide, like he didn't dare breathe. She stepped inside, dripping on his pristine hardwood floors. "You hurt me, you left, and I rebuilt without you. But I never stopped wondering if you were looking for me in the crowd, if I was still somewhere inside you." His voice was barely audible. "You were, every day." Eleanor reached for his hand, placed hers over his chest. "This isn't forgiveness," she whispered. "This is just starting again, slower, wiser." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I'll take whatever version of you you're willing to give." She smiled, tired and whole and trembling. "Then start here." And then softly, like something once broken being put gently back together, she kissed him. Not the kiss of a second chance, but of a woman finally choosing the love she knew she could survive without, and still, somehow, wanted back. Asterisk, the kiss was quiet, full of unsaid things. It didn't taste like the past. It tasted like something earned. Elena pulled away first. "I'm not yours, Julian," she whispered. "Not yet." He nodded, heart in his throat. "I know. I'm not the girl who skipped classes to meet you at that greasy diner anymore. I've grown, I've hurt, and I've learned how to live without you. I don't want the girl from back then," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "I want the woman you are now. All of her." They stood in silence for a beat. The city lit up behind them, casting long shadows across the room. "Why didn't you fight for me back then?" she finally asked. "Why was I so easy to leave?" Julian stepped back, guilt flickering in his eyes. "Because I was weak. I thought I had to become something first. Make a name, earn power, money, respect. I convinced myself that loving you was a distraction." Elena's jaw clenched. "And when you finally got it all, you let them tell you who to marry." He winced. "Do you love her?" she asked softly. "Lena." He shook his head. "She's like a sister to me. The engagement was her father's idea. I didn't know how to say no without tearing the company apart. But I called it off, for good. Told her the truth about you, about everything." Elena looked down at the puddle forming around her boots. "I don't want to be a secret again." "You won't be. I won't build a future for someone who still flinches when it's inconvenient. I'm not that man anymore, Elena." She searched his face for lies, for weakness, for any trace of the boy who left her holding a dream that didn't belong to her anymore. But he didn't waver, and for the first time, she believed him. Still, she needed time. So instead of falling into his arms, she gave him a rule. "1 dinner a week," she said. "You show up, you cook or try to, and we talk. No expectations, no more grand gestures, just real things." He grinned through the sting in his chest. "You're making me work for it." "Damn right I am." Julian reached for her hand, lacing their fingers. "Then I'll show up," he said, "every single week, for as long as it takes." She gave a soft nod, and he leaned down to press a kiss to the back of her hand, not rushed, not needy, just present. And when she left his apartment that night, she walked slower this time, not because she was unsure, but because her heart, for once, wasn't chasing someone. It was finally being met halfway. 2 months later, Elena stood in her new kitchen. It was hers. Not a borrowed prep space or a crammed apartment stove, but a warm, Sunlit bakery tucked at the corner of a quiet block in the city. Loon and Thine, the sign read, hand-painted and crooked, just the way she liked it. She had saved, fought, sacrificed. Julian had offered to invest. She refused. Not because of pride, but because she needed to know deep down that she could stand without him before ever choosing to lean on him again. He understood, and he waited. Every Thursday night. He showed up. Badly chopped vegetables, terrible playlists, conversation that slowly stitched them back together. He told her about the company, how he stepped down from his father's shadow, started something smaller, something real. He didn't just want to build an empire anymore. He wanted to build a life with her in it. But Elena didn't say yes. Not yet. She wore her bracelet. She let him hold her hand. They kissed under streetlights and slow danced in flour-dusted kitchens. But she hadn't said the words, not because she didn't feel them, but because this time, when she said I love you, it would come from a place whole enough to mean forever. That Thursday night, Julian was late for the first time. She waited at the table, candles flickering, the plates set, heart doing that terrible thing it used to do when he vanished. But when the door opened, he wasn't alone. He carried a small, nervous girl in his arms, 8, maybe 9. She had bright eyes and a notebook pressed to her chest. This is Sophie, he said softly. My niece, my sister's daughter. I've been helping raise her since her mom got sick. Elena blinked, stunned. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid it'd scare you. I didn't want to complicate what we were building. But if we're building something real, then you should know the real me. Elena knelt down. Hi, Sophie, she said gently. Do you like cake? The girl lit up. Only chocolate, and only if it's warm. Elena smiled. Then I think, we're going to get along just fine. Julian watched them, the woman he loved and the little girl he never thought would matter to anyone but him, and something in his chest finally exhaled. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep on the bakery couch with chocolate on her cheek, Julian walked Elena to the door. She looked up at him with something warm and steady in her eyes. I used to wonder if I'd ever feel safe again, she said. If someone could love all of me, the ambition, the cracks, the past. But now I know. I was never too much. You were just a small back then. He nodded, eyes glassy, and now. She leaned in, kissed him softly. Now you fit. They stood in silence, forehead to forehead, her hand pressed against his heart. I'm not saying forever yet, she whispered. But I'm saying, I'm not afraid of it anymore. And as the rain began to fall outside, Julian whispered, then I'll keep showing up until the day you say it. Elena smiled. Bring chocolate next time. He laughed, and marshmallows always. They kissed again. No urgency, no past. Just the quiet promise of two people who finally met in the middle. And for the first time, the story wasn't about who left. It was about who stayed. Because sometimes, the right person comes back when you finally become the version of yourself worth fighting for. Follow for more stories like this.